Hi guys, and welcome to Creative Cakes by Sharon. Everyone's getting ready for the spooky season, so today I'm making the most adorable little Hello Kitty skeleton cake. So let's get started. I have my cake here and I'm using a template to cut the shape of Hello Kitty out. You can get a copy of the template from a link in the description box below, as well as all of the materials that I'll be using today. Now I'm going to fill the centre of the cake with some frosting, and then once I pop the top of the cake on, I need to give it a good crumb coat, making sure it's nice and smooth before popping it in the fridge for about 25 minutes to set. Once the frosting has set, I can get to work on rolling out some black fondant to about 3mm thick, and you can always use your template to judge how large you need to roll out the fondant, making sure you leave enough to cover the sides of the cake as well. As soon as I've gently rolled the fondant over the cake, I can smooth it down on the top and open up the fondant on the sides to remove any wrinkles and press it nicely into the crevices. After I've trimmed off all of the excess fondant, I'm going to take a little extra time here to keep smoothing over the top, sides and edges of the cake to make sure Hello Kitty's shape looks well defined. Now here I have some white fondant and I'm going to cut out all the little shapes I need to create Hello Kitty's tiny little skeleton. The eyes are simply made by using a round small cutter and gently stretching the fondant into an oval shape. The ribs are made by cutting out some thin rectangles, which I then round off the edges and then shape them over the top of the template. It's a good idea to let these pieces of fondant dry slightly on the template as they hold their curved shape a little bit better so that when we transfer them onto the cake they don't lose their shape. Then for her tiny little arm and leg bones, I just cut out some wider rectangles, narrowed them on the sides, cut out a little V wedge from the top and bottom, and then rounded off the edges. If you happen to find little bone-shaped candy, you could always use that to save this step, but they're really not that hard to make in any case. Now to make sure all her little bones are placed in the correct anatomical position, I've left the template on top of the cake, and with the back end of my paintbrush I'm going to make some light indents into the fondant and then go ahead and stick everything into place. Using this nice bright orange fondant, I'm cutting out her bow, and after I've smoothed over the edges and placed it on the cake, I'm going to add some detail with some white fondant as well as an outline of black fondant rolled into a nice thick snake. Last but not least, I've rolled out some white fondant for her whiskers, and these need to be dried for at least half an hour so they stiffen up nicely. And then I can place them onto the cake and she's all ready to spook you out. Well, not really. everyone and welcome to Creative Cakes by Sharon. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this chocolate Easter bunny cake. This is a cute and simple little Easter bunny cake that you can prepare as a gift for someone special at Easter, or even use him as your centerpiece for your Easter celebrations. So let's get started. I have here one of my 8-inch super moist round chocolate cakes. I'll leave a link to this recipe in the description box below. And the first thing I need to do is divide my cake into two. Now I've got here 2 cookie cutters, a large one and a small one. And what I need to do is cut out 4 large round circles as well as 2 smaller ones. Using some buttercream frosting, I'm going to start stacking my cakes. I'm going to use 3 of the largest circles for the body, and then the 2 smaller ones plus the 4th large circle for the head. Using a nice sharp knife, I'm going to round off the edges of the top cake on the body section. And then I'm going to make 2 diagonal cuts at the front of the cake. Using the excess cake that was left over after the circles were cut out, I'm just going to pop it up against my cake and cut out 2 small feet. I'm going to start rounding off the top edge of the head section for the Easter bunny. Now with the little shavings that I take off, I'm actually going to stick them back onto the cake at the bottom, just popping them onto the buttercream frosting. I just want to fill this region of the cake out a little bit. I also need to remove the back section of the larger circle of cake because this is the back of the Easter bunny's head and it needs to be a little bit flat. And I also need to cut a little triangle wedge out of the front sections of the cake. This is the snout or where the whiskers are on the Easter bunny, so I just want to round it off a little bit. Using some chocolate ganache, I'm going to cover the head section of my cake, but as I do, I've got a few pieces of offcuts here which I'm going to build up a little bit more onto the snout to give it a bit more of a rounded shape. Once the whole head section has been covered in chocolate ganache, I need to keep it in the fridge for about 15 minutes to set. In this time, I can work on covering the body and the feet of the Easter bunny in some chocolate ganache and also popping it into the fridge after I'm done. Once both pieces of cake come out of the fridge, I'm going to smooth over the ganache using some boiling water to heat up my spatula and glide it over the entire surface of the cake. Now comes the fun part, and that's covering our Easter bunny in some fondant. To help the fondant stick to the cake, I'm just going to brush it with a little bit of water. Drape the fondant over the cake, smooth out all of the edges and cut off the excess. For the bunny's tummy, I've rolled out some white fondant and I'm just going to cut a few divots into the edge just to make it look a little bit more natural and pop this oval piece of white fondant onto the tummy region. I'm going to use the back of my paintbrush to press gently into the fondant to create a little bit more detail for the feet. Now I'm going to cover the Easter bunny's head with some grey fondant as well, just leaving the front of his nose uncovered because I'm going to cover that with some white fondant. just stick a rectangular piece of white fondant across the front of the Easter Bunny's face, cut it nicely to shape, and then once again make some little divots along the edge to give it a bit of a fur look. I'm going to assemble my Easter Bunny together now, using a little bit of chocolate ganache as the glue and a wooden skewer to ensure that it's nice and stable. My Easter Bunny still needs some arms and ears, so first I'm going to roll out some nice thick pieces of fondant for his arms and attach them to the body. It just needs to be tapered at the top and nice and round at the other end. And I'll finish off his hands by pressing into the fondant to create some detail for the paws. For the Easter Bunny's ears, I'm going to assemble a strip of pink fondant onto some grey fondant and then cut around to get a nice Easter Bunny ear shape. I've added some Tylose powder into this fondant so that it hardens up quickly, and I just need to insert 2 wires into each of the ears. I'm going to pop it aside to dry a little bit while I work on the bunny's face. For the eyes, I'm just going to layer up some of my fondant. This little bunny is going to have blue eyes. Add the mouth and a little pink nose, as well as a nice piece of square fondant at the front for his teeth. At this point I can insert his ears into the cake. They have hardened, however they're still pliable enough for me to mould the ears to the shape of his head. I wanted to add a pretty pink bow to my Easter Bunny. And I can't forget his whiskers, and for that I'm using this nice shiny silver decorative wire. The wire is just for decoration, guys, so remember to remove it before you serve the cake. And of course, what's an Easter Bunny without any Easter eggs? So guys, I hope you enjoyed my chocolate Easter Bunny cake tutorial. He was certainly lots of fun to make, and he'd make a terrific Easter gift for someone.